Hi everyone, it's late autumn and Tarka is away at the boat builders, so I've got no excuse not to get on with a few gardening jobs. However, I know that when Tarka comes back later in the winter, it's likely to be the start of a very busy time trying to get her ready for the new season, so I've been trying to think of what jobs I can do in the meantime to get a little bit ahead of the game. The first job was to accumulate everything I've got which we might want to take on Tarka for a camping trip for one night. This was a combination of stuff that lived on Tarka last year, a couple of boxes of spares, first aid kit, fenders and other sailing related things, plus a selection from our land camping kit, sleeping bags, lilos and cooking equipment. Not everything in this pile of kit is quite what it seems. This bucket represents Tarka's toilet. I haven't quite decided yet how to deal with toileting needs on Tarka, but some kind of portaloo would seem appropriate, and there's one model called a bivy-loo which can fold flat and has an excellent method of dealing with the waste, which looks like the favourite at the moment. But if any of you have any recommendations on that subject, I'd be very keen to hear about them. I certainly won't be using this particular bucket as it is very collapsible. The anchor is another decision to be made. It's a CQR, the anchor that came with Tarka, with a long length of chain and rope. A CQR holds quite well on various kinds of bottom, but is not very stowable. Seabear has a folding grapnel anchor, which seems to work quite well. And again, if any of you have any recommendations on anchor types for a boat like Tarka, I'd be very pleased to hear about them too. Finally, this pump is not a bilge pump, it's an air pump, but it represents the fact that Tarka needs a handheld bilge pump, which I haven't got round to buying just yet. And sorry Tilly, at the moment we have no plans at all to add a ship's cat to our kit list. The second job has been to try and gain a little bit of second-hand experience. The book I've been reading is Open Boat Cruising by Frank and Margaret Dye. Frank and Margaret Dye, as I'm sure many of you know, are a couple of legends of dinghy cruising, having taken their wayfarer wanderer on some amazingly adventurous expeditions across open sea to Norway, Iceland, around the north of Scotland, and encountered dismastings and force 9 gales and capsizes along the way. They also, it's fair to say, did some much gentler cruising on rivers, estuaries and lakes, much more of the kind that I'm planning to do on Tarka. They didn't do it specifically to break records, they just did it because they loved doing it, and that is clear from the book. The book is, as you would expect, an inspiring read, but fair to say they don't pull any punches, and there is possibly as much to put you off dinghy cruising as there is to inspire you to pursue it, with talk of seasickness and other unpleasantness in addition to the near disasters that I mentioned earlier. However, there is no doubt that they were great sailors. There are lots of lessons to take away from it, even though a lot of the cruises they did are things that I would not be considering doing in Tarka. The third job has been to choose some new ropes for Tarka. This has been quite good fun because it feels like I'm almost starting from scratch. My other sailing boats until now, as I've said before, have been one design, fairly modern racing classes, where although there's a little bit of room for individuality, mostly everyone in the fleet has pretty much the same ropes for the same jobs. But with Tarka, not only do I not have another Westray 16 to copy, but she's a quite different kind of boat to what I've had before, being a fairly traditional large cruising dinghy. So I've had to really think about my choices of rope for lots of different reasons, different purposes. I've ended up with, well, I've got 4 bits of rope here, 3 quite different types of rope, and these 2 are the same type of rope but different thicknesses, and I'll tell you what they're all for. So this is 12 Platt 4mm Dyneema, and it is to replace Tarka's shrouds. I've never used rope for shrouds before, and at the moment Tarka does have wire, so this is a little bit of an experiment, but there are so many reasons to do it and hardly any reasons not to. The main reasons, I suppose, for doing it are the fact it is strong enough. You get the same strength or more strength from this rope as you would for an equivalent diameter of standard wire. The breaking load on this is about 1.5 tons. It's also very, very, very low stretch. It's less than 1% stretch. So it's giving you really all the qualities that wire has. But it's softer. It's nicer to have on the boat when you take the rig down, instead of having fairly stiff and aggressive wire that can be uncomfortable, can scrape on the sides of the boat, scrape on the paint and the varnish. This is going to be much nicer to collapse down and much kinder on the boat. Another advantage of this rope over wire is that I can cut it to length and splice the loops into it myself. I don't have the tools to do that in wire. So I'm going to splice a loop into the top end, go over the top of the mast, about that size, and it's really easy to do this kind of rope with a fid. This is a splicing fid, and you can just separate the rope and work the fid in. And I'll do another video showing me actually doing this job. For any of you who don't know how to splice this rope, it's so quick and simple to do. And then the other end, down on the deck level, I've done this bit already to show you what the plan is. So I can make it slightly adjustable if I don't get the length quite right first time, or if the rope just lengthens slightly, just creeps a little bit over time and the shrouds need shortening. So I've just threaded the rope up the middle of itself there to make an adjustable loop, which then I can just tie off with a half hitch there, and that'll be the bottom end of the shrouds. I think the only disadvantage that I can think of for rope compared to wire is that the rope would be a little bit more susceptible to UV damage potentially. But I don't see that as an issue with Tarka, because she's going to be stored with the mast down and the rope is going to be tucked underneath the cover. So the only time it's going to be exposed to UV is when it's actually in use. Wire, of course, can rust, and some people have said there's potential for the wire to rust actually inside the wire, so you wouldn't necessarily see it. Whereas this, of course, this will wear away, but you should be able to see the wear, and so you get plenty of warning before it snaps. Of course, it is absolutely critical that this doesn't snap, because the mast would come down and that would be a disaster. It would break the mast, if nothing else. So that's that kind. This is the next kind. So this is polyester. It's called braid on braid. The manufacturer is Liros, and this is not as low stretch as this. It's up to about 5% stretch, and it's not quite as strong either, but it's still pretty high performance rope. And the purpose of this one is to be a reefing line. So this is going to be tied around the reefing eye in the leech of Tarka's sail. It'll probably actually be tied down to the boom, and then I might well loop it up through that reefing eye, then back down to a block on the boom, and then along the boom to a cleat. The idea being that when you pull the end of the rope through the cleat, it will pull the reefing eye down to the boom and start the reef off, and then you can tie up the rest of the sail using the reefing ties. So this needs to be a bit more easy to handle. There's no need for this to be easy on the hands really at all, because you're not going to be pulling it regularly, whereas this needs to be a bit more pleasant on the hand, so you can grip it and pull it on. And although the stretchiness is not as important, I don't want to be too stretchy, because if it's a very stretchy rope, this is holding tension in the foot of the sail, and if it's stretchy and there's a gust of wind, then that would let the foot of the sail get a bit more sag in it, so the sail will essentially power up when there's a gust. So like other sail controls, kicking straps, Cunninghams, etc. on racing dinghies, you want to have control over your sail, which means you want low stretch, so that what you pull on at one end of the rope, the same thing happens at the other end of the rope without too much flexibility. This is also polyester, but it's a 3-strand polyester, And this is really very stretchy for a rope. It's up to 15% stretch, and it's also not as strong as this rope. It's the same thickness, but it's not strong. I think the breaking load on this one's about 400 kilograms or something like that, so it's not ridiculously weak, but it's nothing like as strong as this 4mm Dyneema. This is for Tarka's topping lift, so it's going to be led from the back end of the boom and up to the top of the mast to support the boom, to hold the boom up when the sail is down. So it doesn't need to be very strong. All it's going to do is hold the boom up, and the main thing is to try not get it confused with other ropes. So Tarka's main halyard is made of this rope, so I wanted something that looks a little bit different, but I want to try and keep to these fairly brown, white colours, with Tarka being a fairly traditional boat. I don't want to cover her in pink and purple, blue, red ropes that the racing dinghies tend to use in order to differentiate the rope colours, but it just wouldn't look right on a boat like Tarka. So a very different kind of rope instead will help to differentiate the two. And finally, this is, as I said, the same kind of rope as this one, 3-strand polyester, but this is 8mm rather than 6. And this is for Tarka's lifeline. So I read an article in, I think it was Yachting World a few months ago, which made me think about the risks of man overboards. I'm fairly used to falling over the side of a dinghy. It's an occupational hazard in racing dinghies, but with racing dinghies they tend to capsize if they lose their crew, whereas Tarka won't have that safety feature. And this article revealed research that shows that there's 47% of man overboard incidents result in fatalities, which sounds amazing, but and it was relevant to the kind of boating that we do. It was saying a lot of it is coastal and in canoes and sailing boats, etc. Although I think the highest, the worst statistics were coming from fishing boats. But I thought, if I fall overboard on Tarka, there's a fair chance, if there's no one else in Tarka or if it's one of the kids, that they wouldn't be able to sail back to pick me up, and I wouldn't be able to swim after Tarka fast enough to catch up with her potentially. So it could be really nasty. And the only way to solve that problem is to have a lifeline. So the idea is that this will be clipped around sort of the side of my buoyancy aid, just there, when I'm helming Tarka. And it needs to be strong enough, of course, that it's not going to break when I fall out. But in this case, it's actually, I think, a real positive to have stretchy rope. So again, this is up to 15% stretch under load. But the stretch means that when I fall out and Tarka sails off into the distance, when the slack is taken up, it's not going to be taken up as suddenly as if there is no stretch. The stretch will give up a little bit of give, which means there's less chance of breakage at either end, either the end that's attached to Tarka or the end that's attached to me, or the rope itself, I suppose, and also it'll be a little bit less unpleasant on me when suddenly I get hauled through the water. Of course, this will only work if I am still conscious and able to swim. It's not a life-saving device if I have been knocked overboard and knocked out by the boom or something like that, but it will at least keep me attached to Tarka if I happen to fall over the side without a crew on board who are able to recover me. So those are the 4 ropes I've just bought. And now they're just going to sit and wait until Tarka returns. Well, this is quite a different kind of rigging, but it's still a winter job, and I thought it was a good opportunity to test out this new wireless microphone which I've got, with the hope of extending the range of what I'm able to record once the sailing starts next season. I've also had to buy a new GoPro since the old one died about a year and a half ago. The very last thing it recorded was a windy sail in Sea Bear down Coniston Water, and with the new GoPro came an adapter, which meant I was able to get the old SD card out of the old GoPro and and get hold of that footage, which I wasn't even sure it had recorded. So I was really glad to see it has, and it's all there. And once I've trimmed that down a little bit, I'll post it in a few days' time, and we'll finally get some a bit more sailing footage on this, which is after all supposed to be a sailing channel. But that's all for this one. It's probably the last video I make, apart from posting the ice splicing video, and hopefully the video of me sailing down Coniston, as I said, in a few days' time. But good time to say Merry Christmas, and hopefully we will see Tarka again at some point before too long in the new year.